Hello and welcome to Dr. Poole's SharePoint surgery session. Get more from SharePoint using these top 10 Harmony features. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started. You're welcome to submit questions at any time using the chat window on your screen. We'll address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's webinar. If we don't manage to answer all of your questions, someone will follow up with you shortly via email. If you're interested in trying out the enterprise version of Harmony, please send us a request in the chat window and someone will contact you after the webinar to get you started. We'll also make a recording of the webinar available to you in a couple of days. It's my pleasure to introduce you to today's speaker, Richard Poole, Chief Technology Officer of EMEA at Harmony. Richard heads up the pre-sales team for Harmony across the EMEA and Asia Pacific regions, working both directly with key accounts as well as Harmony's partner channel. Bringing with him 18 years of experience in data management systems, Richard has helped many companies to realize the significant benefits in productivity that collaborative platforms enable. Before joining Harmony in 2011, Richard worked for Dassault Systems PLM for over 10 years. Richard also has a Bachelor of Engineering degree in Automotive Engineering from Loughborough University. Richard, please get us started.
Thank you very much, Susan, and welcome everyone to this month's session. So I think, there's a number of different kind of flavors of Harmony, and maybe, the people on the session aren't necessarily familiar with all of those. You may be using the Outlook integration at the moment. You may be evaluating that, or you may be using the mobile app, for example. So I just wanted to kind of get a feel for some feedback from the audience to see who's using what from Harmony and what your current kind of status is with that.
So if you could please answer the question on your screen as to which of Harmony's products you are currently using. And if you're using more than one, that's great. We're happy to hear it. Harmony for Outlook, Harmony Mobile, Harmony Office Web App. You're evaluating Harmony or you haven't started using it yet? Okay, Richard, let's show you.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody.
What?
Thank you, Susan. So yeah, it looks like the vast majority of people are actually using Harmony for Outlook, which is great. I think, regarding, the Outlook integration, a lot of people are kind of familiar who use Harmony, are familiar with the kind of core functionality and what they kind of like looked for when they were searching for a solution, which is basically dragging and dropping emails and documents into SharePoint, which obviously is a fundamental part of Harmony, but there's a lot more that Harmony can offer to really help you get the most out of your SharePoint platform and get your job done at the end of the day. So we've highlighted kind of 10 common areas that people maybe aren't so familiar with that could really help you get a lot more out of the product. So we'd just like to ask you another question.
So which of the Harmony's features are you using? Are you saving emails, saving attachments, sending links, updating your metadata, or accessing multiple locations like SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams? There you get the results, Richard.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone, once again. So, I mean, the clear winners there are saving emails and saving attachments, as kind of I was suggesting regarding kind of like the drag and drop functionality. But I I can see some people are using the using Harmony to actually send links to people, and working with metadata and connecting to multiple locations as well, which is great. So let's take a look at some of the areas that hopefully you can learn a few things from today's session. Now, obviously, capturing emails, capturing attachments, we can do that by drag and drop, which is fairly intuitive and obvious. But also, you might not have noticed that Harmony also integrates to other areas of your Outlook to actually allow you to save emails and save attachments, for example, from like the contextual menus when you right-click on an email or you right-click on an attachment, and say to save to SharePoint using a kind of prompt type mechanism. So it's a little bit different than the kind of drag and drop, but it's another way that people can capture that content. It'll obviously be captured in exactly the same way. All the header information from those emails will be captured and those kind of things. If there's required metadata, the user will be prompted for it. So it will all fall in line with a consistent end result, but also give you different ways to actually capture that content. Likewise, we can also use ribbon controls as well. So Harmony actually integrates to the ribbon at the top of Outlook. And that, again, that is contextual to what you actually have selected. So if you selected an email, you can choose to save the message, save the attachments. You can even do things like saving draft emails into SharePoint for kind of peer review before the email actually gets sent. And again, that may be something that you're not using at the moment, but we actually use it ourselves. Sometimes, if one of my colleagues is wanting to compose an email and ask me to add some feedback into that, rather than emails going backwards and forwards between us, they can actually put that draft into SharePoint, and I can see that and then modify that and add my comments or my parts to the email, and then either of us can actually send it to the intended kind of recipient. And also, obviously, those changes are tracked in SharePoint, and we can see who's made what changes and things. So, particularly around email management, that's a really nice feature. But also, I think a lot of people may be not aware that Harmony is a standard kind of Windows UI component. So you can actually drag content into the sidebar from other windows as well, very commonly from Windows Explorer. So if you've got some documents in a file share or on a local directory, then you can actually just drag those into the sidebar to capture them. So let's just take a look at some of those in my environment. So hopefully you can see my Outlook now. And for example, as I'm sure you're familiar with, I can easily navigate into, let's say, a site and a library that I want to use for the purposes of this session. And we can see all the content that I've got access to there. So for example, now, as you're aware, I can drag and drop emails, but also I can say that I want to save that message to SharePoint, and then it will navigate to the same location that I've actually already navigated to in the sidebar. So again, as I say, you're getting that kind of consistent user experience, whichever way you actually save the email. Excuse me. I can carry on working, obviously, while that's being uploaded, and as I say, all the header information, the content type and things are automatically being mapped, as again, as you're probably familiar with. Also, as I say, if I've actually got an email, maybe with an attachment, if I click on the ribbon controls here, you can see that I can save the message, or I can save the attachments. Likewise, I can right-click on the attachment itself. So again, there's many different ways to actually store that content and get it into SharePoint. And likewise, if I've got some documentation, as I say, on maybe my local machine, so let's take some documents from here. And maybe I've got a particular document that I want to get into this particular library. So I could take this proposal, for example, drag and drop it into there, and then I'm prompted to choose the content type if you've got multiple content types configured in your libraries, and work very effectively to get that content into there, work with the metadata and things as well. I'm just going to save that content into there. So let's take a look at another area that, again, you may not be familiar with Harmony. Harmony can actually give you a consolidated kind of update stream of information that you may want to be following and may be notified when something changes. So Harmony has a favorites mechanism. So if I navigate to a library or a folder or a view in a SharePoint library, I can actually add any of those things as a favorite into my Harmony interface. And when I actually add that, I have a few options. Now, the one that I want to focus on today really is the ability to follow that location for activity. So here we can see that it's actually like a library or a view actually in this library, this finance library that we're just working in at the moment. And there I can choose to be notified when any updates actually occur in that view. And that could be, you know, like a document has been updated or a document has been added to that location. And I can be notified nice and easily when that happens. So rather than receiving lots of email notifications, I'll actually receive like a red dot on the People tab or Updates tab in Harmony. So again, let's take a look at how that works in practice. So you can see here, I'm actually following a number of different locations at the moment. All of these favorites that I've added, I want to be notified when there's any updates. Again, I can do that when just by clicking on the add to favorites. I can choose to follow that for activity. And you'll see that a red dot had appeared on the sidebar there. So I can see, for example, that some of my colleagues have updated and added some content into some of those locations I'm following, and it's nice and intuitive. I can also filter that for updates. So, for example, if I want to see about a particular contract or something like that, then I can filter that down, or maybe a proposal. But you can see that as I type, that kind of activity gets filtered based on what I'm typing. So I think one of the other things that people, probably about half the audience said that they're used to is actually sending links to people in their emails using Harmony, and that's really kind of a fundamental change in the way that people actually work. Because obviously with Harmony, where you've got content in SharePoint, you can browse to it, you can find it, you can follow it, like we've just seen. If I then want to actually send that to somebody, I can do it in a number of different ways, and I can easily just navigate to what I need to send to somebody, drag it into an email, and by default it will create a SharePoint link to that item. I've also got the ability to add attachments in the same way, just by holding down the Alt key on the keyboard while I drag and drop, and the attachment will be added to the email. But also I can actually share content directly from the sidebar. So if I select a document, right click and say share, I can choose to give access to a colleague or a contact to actually be able to work with that document. We can also do that when you're actually sending a link to the recipient. And at that point, we can even check whether the recipient has access to that particular item, and choose to give them access if they don't already have it. So let's have a look at each of those in a bit more detail. So if I'm composing a new email, Harmony's available in the emails that I'm composing and things. So for example, if I've got this proposal that I've just been working on, that I've got into SharePoint, maybe some other people have made some changes to it, I can simply drag and drop that into the email to create a nicely formatted SharePoint link. Now I'm just going to send this to Susan and say new proposal. But as I said, I can also choose to send it as an attachment instead. So if I just hold down the Alt key while I drag and drop, the document is attached to the email. But if I do want to actually send links, because I think, it's very much the right way to be working. I don't want lots of email attachments floating around that are uncontrolled and could be sent to the wrong person, for example. I might know 10 different Susans, and if I've sent an attachment to the wrong Susan, it could be confidential information that's being sent to the wrong person. So sending a link uses obviously the security of SharePoint, and then we can control who's got access to it and things like that. But if I now send this link, Harmony has the ability to check whether Susan has access to that particular link I'm sending. And if she doesn't have access to it, which she doesn't in this case, I can choose to grant her view or edit capabilities on that particular document. So it might be that I'm asking Susan to actually make some changes to that document, so I'm going to give her edit capabilities and send that on its way. Likewise, I can actually do that directly from the sidebar. If we take a different document here, I can share that document with somebody new, but also I can see who that document is currently shared with, and it will return a list of all the people who have access to that particular document. I can even invite more people from there as well. Again, all based on the permissions and the configuration that you have in your SharePoint environment. So obviously one of those scenarios is if I send a document as a link and somebody makes some changes, then obviously those changes are tracked in SharePoint, and we're all working on the same kind of document, and it's being version controlled very nicely in SharePoint itself. However, if I do need to send documents as attachments, maybe to somebody external who's not got access to our SharePoint, which is very common when you're sending documents to clients and things, you don't necessarily give them access to into your own environment. But if you're sending a document as an attachment, you're asking them to make some changes, or they've added some comments to it, and they send it back to you as another document. Typically, where, for example, here, they may have changed the file name. If I actually want to save that as a new version, that's very difficult to do in SharePoint, because I'd manually have to kind of rename it back to the original file name. However, Harmony gives me the ability, if I drag and drop an attachment onto an existing document, even if the file name has changed, I can wait for a few seconds and choose to add it as a new version, and that will actually rename it back to the original the original file name. So again, let's have a look at how that might work, because for example here, I may have received this claim summary with somebody's field started filling it in. So if I now want to add that as a new version to that proposal that I sent to Susan earlier, maybe she's changed the name of the document, I can simply choose to drag that onto an existing document. If I don't wait for a few seconds, it will add it as a separate document, because you don't want to have mistakes being made. But if I purposefully hover over that for a few seconds, I can then see that I can choose to add that as a new version. And what that will do is it will check that document out. It will save the document for me, the new version. It will even give me the opportunity here to update any of the metadata. So for example here, maybe I want to define the account for this particular document and say who the account manager is. So let's say Fred in this case. Again, all of the metadata that you've got configured in your SharePoint environment is fully supported by Harmony. So if I then save that, it's actually going to check that document in as a new version. We can see it's just been checked in just now, and I can see in the version history, visibility of who's made what changes to this document. I can even open up specific versions and things as well, maybe to compare them. So we touched a bit on kind of metadata just then, and I think it's important to kind of take that to the next level and utilize that metadata as well. So I think the first challenge of using metadata is kind of getting people to actually fill it in, and I think people are reluctant to do that if they don't see the value of it to them in the first place. So one key thing with the use of metadata is that you can configure views in SharePoint. They come through into Harmony, whether they're public or private views that maybe you've configured yourself, and you can choose and use those from within the Harmony interface in exactly the same way as you can from a web browser. What that means is, though, that you can look at the same library in a number of different ways, and it could be filtered by different content or by different properties and those kind of things. It can also be grouped. In this case, these documents or this view is being grouped by an approval status or something. So it kind of, as I say, if end users start to see the benefit of, okay, I can see why that metadata has value because it's helping me to organize my content and to be able to find stuff easier, then they're more likely to actually fill that information in. You can then even filter those views by tags and terms, so I can have a filtered view. In this case, for example, I've just filtered this by territory, and then even though the view is being grouped by a status, I'm filtering it by something else. And not only kind of like the taxonomy type fields like tags and terms, but also we can filter that further by additional columns as well. So in this case, like it might be a people field or a choice field or whatever. So I can then have a filtered view of information that's nice and easy to navigate around. We can also apply metadata automatically when people are saving content. So as we saw before, dragging and dropping documents. Again, this is something you may not be familiar with at the moment, but if you've, for example, got a view that's being grouped by a particular property, if you then drag a document onto the kind of group name, again, if you wait for a few seconds, like with the add version, you can choose to add that document with that metadata. That's really, really helpful for an end user to actually, again, really grasp the concept of, okay, I can see why I should be using metadata. And if you make it as easy as possible for people to actually fill that in and automate some of it to some degree, then it really helps them. So again, let's take a look at each of those in detail. So, for example, in this particular library, I've got a number of different views. The default view is just displaying all the documents in this library in this instance. But you can see I've got a number of different views that are available to me. So if I select this view that's being grouped by the account name, then, for example, here I can see all the documents that have been tagged with a particular property. Again, I can filter that by further information. So again, any kind of managed metadata or enterprise keywords, for example, that may be here, the client name is being presented to me. I can then apply a filter to that information. But as I say, I can also filter content by the columns that are being displayed as well. So for example, if I want to see documents that relate to a particular account, I can then choose that column and apply a filter based on those account names. So for example here, if I just want to see a couple of relevant accounts, then it's giving me that filtered view, even though that's grouped by another property, which is great. So it's really giving me an intuitive kind of feel for the content that's in that particular library. Now, if I've got, as I say, a document that I want to capture and I want to tag with the account name, for example. So if I drag and drop that document and just again wait for a few seconds over the group name, then I can apply that to that document as it's being saved. So again, let's just display the properties, and you'll see that in this case, the account name has been assigned to that particular document. And then if there's other properties, maybe like the account manager again, can be filled in this case manually. And go ahead and save that. I can also update existing documents with new metadata as well. So, for example, if I've got a few here that haven't actually been tagged, so I can select a bunch of those documents using normal kind of keyboard shortcuts with, if I hold down the Control or the Shift key to actually select multiple items. I can then right-click on those items and say that I want to edit the properties of all of them. So in this case, you can see those 4 items I've selected, but I actually want to update the account for those 4 items. So I'm actually going to just set those to a particular account name. And what that's going to do is it's going to check out all those items for me, apply the changes to all of them, check them all back in, and as you can see here, it even updates that view dynamically as well. So people can really start to move away from kind of folder structures in SharePoint, which are best avoided if possible, and start to utilize metadata to organize the content instead. So something else that I think a lot of people may not be familiar with because they've kind of looked at Harmony because they needed an Outlook integration is the fact that we can also integrate to other Office applications as well in a couple of different ways. So we can integrate to Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, either as kind of into the standard save and open dialogues in those applications. So for example, here you can see that if I want to open a document, if I go to the normal kind of open dialog, I can actually browse to my Harmony favorites, and then I can select one of those, select a document from it, it will connect to the library, display them to me, and I can open up a document directly from SharePoint. Likewise, that works as well in the save dialogues as well. So if I want to save a document as a document in SharePoint, I can then use those favorites coming from the Harmony that you know in Outlook. That supports all versions of Office, whether you're on premise or online. However, we do also have an Office 365 Office app as well. So for SharePoint Online environments, you can see that I can actually have specific functionality in the ribbon for those applications. So if I compose a new document and then I want to save it to SharePoint, I can then choose the controls directly from here and navigate in kind of like a sidebar type interface, like in the Outlook plugin. So let's just fire up Word and see how both of those kind of approaches work with with those applications. So here, for example, I've just fired up Word. If I go to the standard kind of file operations and say I now want to open a document and browse, I can obviously browse to my local locations and things like that, but also you'll see that I have access to my Harmony favorites automatically from here. And this is a zero install on the Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. It actually takes it from the Harmony installation automatically. So here you can see, for example, those locations that we've added as favorites previously. So let's say I want to get to that finance library that we've just been working in. I just select that favorite. Word then connects to that library, and we can see obviously the kind of content that we had there before. So if I now want to open up a particular document, let's say this proposal, it will then open that up into Word. Now let's take a slightly different approach. As I say, if I launch again, let's show it in Excel in this instance. So now I'm going to go into kind of like normal Excel interface, so we can see here that I actually have ribbon controls to open content from SharePoint or save content to SharePoint directly from there as well. So let's say this could be a new spreadsheet and I want to get it into SharePoint now. So if I hit the save control there, that will then connect to my Office 365 environment, and it will show me the sites that I've got permission to access. It will show the sites that I'm following, much the same way as you have in the Outlook plugin as well. So for example, here I can navigate into this particular site collection, and then I can drill down through the sites and libraries and things that I've actually got access to there. So let's just put this in this kind of demo environment, and select a folder to put that into. I can then fill in the file name. So let's say this is for the webinar. And then it will prompt me to actually fill in the metadata that's required in that particular library. Again, we support all the different metadata content types and things, you know, the content types and metadata and all that kind of stuff. There's something else that I think a lot of people aren't necessarily aware of, because they've kind of looked at Harmony for a specific requirement around working maybe with emails and documents, is the fact that we can work with other list types as well. And these could be things like task lists, announcements, contact lists, or custom lists even. And as we can see here, I'm actually connected to a SharePoint site where I've got some libraries, but I've also got some lists there as well. So we can even add in additional list types if you're working, you know, if you've developed your own custom lists and things. And you'll see them displayed much like a document library. Also, much like a document library, we support all the views and the different items that you can create in those lists and things as well. So in this instance, it's a task list, so it's quite handy to, you know, by default, you've got some views there. It could be, you know, my tasks that are assigned to me, or tasks that are overdue or that are active or due today or whatever. I can also edit the properties directly from there. I can add new items from here, and I can also attach documents directly to an item as an attachment, if you're taking that approach. Also, obviously, much like a document library and a view and a folder and a document set and things, I can follow them for activity as well. So then I can be notified when, for example, a task has been assigned to me, because I could be following my task view in this task list. So let's just take a look at an example of that as well. So if I go to my demo site here, again, you'll see that I've got some different list types there. So again, if we take that kind of task list as an example, just select that. Again, you'll see whatever's defined as the default view for that particular list, and all the corresponding metadata being displayed there as well. So I can sort, search, and filter on any of that information as well, like we could do in a document library. But again, what I can do is actually go ahead and maybe update some of the properties there. So let's say this task is assigned to somebody who's maybe been moved on to a different project or something. So if I just right-click on that and say Edit, I can then edit that directly from within the Harmony sidebar. So in this case, maybe I want to reassign it to somebody else. So I'm logged in as a demo user called Annie. So let's assign it to Annie, and then she can start working on it. So let's say I've already started to do some things on that particular task, so I'm going to update the status of it as well. And for example, now if I say I just want to see any tasks that are assigned to this particular user, we can see that particular task I just updated with the status and things as well. As I say, I can then add that as a favorite. I can follow it and be notified when other tasks have been assigned to me, which is nice and handy. But also, maybe I've got a document that I need to attach to that task. So I can simply drag and drop that document there. And then if I view the properties of that, you'll see that attachment within the sidebar as well. So I can just open it from there or do whatever I need to do with it. So something, we asked a question at the beginning, are people using Harmony to actually access content in different locations? I've got a kind of combined view here of sites that I've navigated to, sites that I'm following, so Harmony can automatically pick those up, my OneDrive, and also any teams or groups that I'm a member of as well. So let's just take a look at those. I think we've kind of already seen that a little bit, but just to kind of reiterate that I haven't had to add these followed sites and my OneDrive and Teams here manually. They've been automatically added for me. So if I want to go into my OneDrive and maybe work on some documentation, some preliminary documents or something, I can do that. So I can take this document. I can even then copy that and put a copy of it into, for example, a SharePoint library or a team that I'm a member of. I know that a lot of people in Office 365 environments are starting to try and utilize teams where possible. So you can see here that I'm a member of a number of different teams, and I can easily work on that shared content directly from here as well. Also, the default in Harmony when you launch Harmony is to display the location you last browsed to, that you last used. Now, that's great if you're working in one particular library all the time, but actually, if you're using multiple sites, multiple locations like we've just illustrated, you can also set Harmony to be started up in a few different ways. So I like to have it with this kind of all sites view. So every time I start my Outlook, I have that view of all the sites I'm following, my OneDrive and the groups and teams and things as well. But also I could change that just to display my favorites by default, as we saw before, or it could be my update stream. So that might be the first thing that I want to see, what's new, basically, in the places that I'm following. And finally, I think, at the end of the day, checking in and checking out documents. Let's be realistic. Lots of people kind of forget to check in a document if they're still working on it. Maybe you're going on vacation and you want the other people to be able to access the documents that you've actually been working on. You've got checked out. So Harmony actually adds in an extra view to actually show that give you easy access to all the documents in this location I've got checked out. And then you can select those items to actually check them all back in one go. So again, let's just take a look at that kind of example. Excuse me. So let's go back to actually where we were working before. And again, you may not be familiar with the kind of backwards and forwards navigation here. That's quite intuitive, but you can easily go back to, let's say, a library that we were working on previously, so like this finance library. And I can easily see any documents that are checked out to me. In this case, I don't have any documents checked out, but if I did, so let's just kind of go back to, let's check out a couple of documents as an example. And then select that view again. you'll see just these two documents that are actually checked out to me at the moment. And then I can select those like I did to check them out. I can check them all back in one go and make them available to other people. So you can easily keep things tidy and in check and available to all of your colleagues. Actually, one thing I forgot to show was earlier about the kind of startup view. The way to change that is just to go into the options here by clicking on this kind of triangle at the top right corner of Harmony, and then clicking on the Advanced tab, and you can see the first item there is what do I want to see when I start up Harmony, and these are your options. So for example, if I want to see my favorites view when I start up Harmony every time, then what you'll be presented with is basically this view here. So hopefully that's given everybody some food for thought on how they can use Harmony more effectively. If you're not using Harmony today, then you can register to try the Enterprise Edition that we've been using. But there's also some links here to user documentation and training videos online.
And to make it a little easier, if you'd like to try the enterprise version, you can just answer the question on your screen, which I'll keep up for a minute while I ask Richard some of the questions that have come in. Richard, I see a couple people are asking similar questions, so I'm going to combine. There's somebody's Office 365 doesn't look the same as yours, and someone else can't filter and doesn't know how to get the buttons visible in Excel. And I'm wondering if perhaps you could speak a minute to what Harmony version they need to be on, because I'm going to guess that's what the issue is.
Yeah, it could well be. So obviously different tenants in Office 365 could have different configurations and things, and obviously Microsoft do roll out different updates at different stages, and you may have customized your tenant and things as well. So your tenant may look a little bit different. In Harmony, it will probably look quite similar. However, I think you did just kind of raise one thing that you may have that looks different in your Harmony. So for example, if I go to, I think you said like about filtering or those kind of things. So just a point on this, the current version of Harmony is 6.6. So if you're running an older version, then I do recommend that you update to the latest, which is what I'm using here. So that may look a little bit different. But also, if we go back to, let's say, the filter functionality, and go to that library that we were using before. Now, this button here, the filter by tag feature, is only enabled if you have managed metadata or enterprise keyword fields enabled in the library, because that's what it's actually using. It's using the taxonomy service from SharePoint. And if you don't have those properties, then the button won't be displayed because there's nothing to filter on. However, the other type of filter that we displayed or illustrated, sorry, is the kind of filter by column. So for example, here, if I just right click on a column, I can then choose to filter by the properties displayed in that column as well. So hopefully you should be able to utilize that in your environments as well. And you can filter by multiple columns in that instance as well. So if I just want to see, let's say, European documents or whatever that have been managed by two particular account managers, then I can apply that nice and easily. I think the other thing you talked about is like the buttons in Office. So again, just to kind of illustrate both of those points, the kind of buttons that you see here in the ribbon are our Office app. It's available in the Office store. So if you just click on, for example, the insert here and go to, for example, I can see my add-ins, but also these, you can either manage those centrally in your Office 365 Admin Center, or you can add them yourself. So it really depends on your configuration of Office 365. And then, for example, I can search for Harmony in the store. And it's just a case of adding the app there. Regarding the kind of favorites that I illustrated as well, again, if you are using an older version of Harmony, you may not have that functionality, but we introduced it about a year or so ago. So if I click on the Browse button there, basically we can see that my favorites are available directly from here. If you're not seeing this, then again, I would recommend that you update to the latest version of Harmony. If you're still not seeing it, then please contact us and we can help you out to get that enabled.
Great, and that leads to the next question, Richard, which is someone who doesn't know, how do they update to the newest version of Harmony?
Okay, if you're using the free edition of Harmony, which is just for personal use, then you can click Update. But in the Enterprise edition that I think most of you are probably using and I'm illustrating today, it's more a centralized push of updates. So basically, you can always download the current version or the latest version of Harmony from your secure download area. There's a link to that in your order fulfillment email. Again, if you've misplaced that or you don't have access to it, then please contact us and we can give you access as a customer. And then you can download the latest MSI package and push that out to all your users in a managed way.
Great. If we've rebranded Harmony, does it keep the changes after the application is updated?
Yes, it does. So the way that Harmony is kind of rebranded is with just your own icons and a set of registry keys. So nothing in the product changes those kind of that configuration, and you typically manage those separately to the update of the product. So if you've rebranded, you update the product, there won't be any issues with that.
Okay. Does Harmony 6.6, the newest version, work with if I only have Office 2010 or Office 2013?
Yes, absolutely. So Harmony has always supported everything from Outlook 2007 upwards. So obviously 2010, 2013 are included in that. And it's actually the same MSI package for all of them.
Okay. Can you visualize calendars in SharePoint in your Outlook calendar?
So we haven't done anything specifically around calendars in the Outlook sidebar, because in Outlook you can connect to a SharePoint calendar anyway, just by going to your calendar and then connecting to a SharePoint calendar.
Okay. There are still more questions, Richard, but I feel like I want to give everybody 5 or 10 minutes until their next meeting's on the hour. So with that, thank you for that presentation, and thank all of you for joining us today. If we didn't answer your questions, we will reach out to you and have someone will answer them soon. You will receive an email in the next couple of days with a link to view this webinar, and we look forward to meeting you again at our next webinar. Thank you.